Welcome to this special report. Now introducing award-winning investigative reporter Judd McIlvain.
This interview is based on the true stories of the last surviving member of a three-member CIA contract team known as the 231 Club. These three covert soldiers followed orders which sent them around the world to deliver weapons, money, train American allies, and sometimes eliminate its enemies. For the first time ever, a contract killer for the CIA speaks out about his assignments and the loyalty and love he had for his country and his team members. What does a young man from a small California town do to get connected with the CIA and a contract killing team? How'd that work?
Well, Chauncey and I met at one of my lectures in, I think it was UCLA. And I would do lectures from time to time about pain control, subconscious conditioning, things on...
Well, what was your educational background that you do lectures like that?
Well, I started out as a hypnotherapist. I then moved on to my own process. I got a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in psychology. I was state licensed as a family therapist. So that's basically the educational background. But it started long before that with my curiosity of the mind and how it worked. Because of this lecture, Chauncey and I met, and he was very interested in this subject matter, and we became friends. And after a few months, he asked me about joining him in doing different assignments for our government. And it was, simple documents I could pick up in other countries and or deliver to other countries.
Did he tell you up front that they also eliminated people?
No. All I knew that it was basically shuffling documents back and forth.
Okay, tell me a little bit more about the background of Chauncey and Michael in this 231 Club.
Chauncey Holt. Now, Chauncey had a very interesting past. He came from the Alleghenies of Kentucky. He was very violent at that time. While he went to grammar school, he was carrying a .45. I mean, it was very violent, even for the children. About the age of 10 or 12, he started High Wire Act because one of his relatives owned what they called a mud circus. He later started training with a man that would do stunt work with aircraft, and he was doing wind walking.
How about wing
walking? Excuse me. And the guy would teach him in exchange how to fly an airplane. Later on, he got into some trouble, Chauncey, after joining the Air Corps, Army Air Corps. He ended up in prison where he met some people that were very well connected to the what we would call the mob, and later ended up working with Meyer Lansky. He was a fine artist, which led him into becoming one of the best forgers around. Then there was Michael Harries. Michael Harries was a great resource when it came to tactics and weapons training. Michael was also the man, by the way, that developed the Harries flashlight technique that is used all over the world by police agencies.
All cops know that. I learned that in the academy.
Yes.
You can see your target perfectly in the dark.
Yes, exactly. Those two men were, you couldn't ask for better when it came to partners, especially when you're putting your life on the line.
Tell me a little bit about what the government wanted you to do when you traveled around.
My first assignment, going back to the beginning, was as a courier.
And you screwed that one up, right?
Well, that didn't go down very well. So that's when he introduced me to Michael Harries. And Michael Harries started training me. Well, I became very good at weapons and tactics. They felt, instead of just doing document work, that maybe I could go on to other areas.
Okay, now on another assignment, you were sent to Latin America to kill another foreign leader who apparently was a problem to the United States government because he was standing in the way of developing democracy for the small country that he was in. Tell me about what happened there.
Well, first of all, we didn't go in to eliminate the leader of a foreign country. This was a man that was in a local government outside of El Salvador, and he was using tactics of torture and killings to get his way. And he needed to be kicked out of the club.
Oh, whoa. What do you mean kicked out of the club?
They were somebody that was going to be eliminated. This was a real brain twister because the guy lived on top of a hill. And he always had somebody start his car before driving. And it was very difficult because the car was very well armored. It had bulletproof glass. It had steel panels in the doors. So we had to find a way to be able to get this guy. So
he
Michael
apparently knew there would be people looking to kill him.
Oh, yes.
He was well prepared for that.
That was obvious. What happened was that Michael came up with a great idea. And the idea was to build a little gas chamber with inside the car.
On some documentation I found while doing research here, it pointed out that you had 11 confirmed kills at that time, and that would be several, almost 20 years ago. Do those memories haunt you? I mean, can you sleep at night?
In the first few months, yeah, it was very difficult. I would see those faces of people from time to time in dreams and during the day or wherever they would pop up. But after a while, you realize that you're doing a job. And like any soldier, you're doing the job for a purpose. And I believed in the purpose.
I understand some of this violence overseas has actually followed you back to Los Angeles. And there was a gun battle in the high desert that you were involved in. In fact, they almost killed you in that.
And at that time, I was doing a lot of lectures. So it wasn't unusual for someone to call and set me up for a lecture. Well, in this particular case, I really was set up. And
it wasn't a lecture.
No. We got a call in. One of the secretaries took the call and set up a lecture for me to speak in front of a group of doctors in Las Vegas. And they asked if I was going to drive, and I always like to drive rather than fly. So they asked me if I could pick up someone in Barstow, which was on the way. So I'd have to go through the desert in order to get there. And I left about 9 o'clock.
You had no idea someone would be waiting in the desert for you?
No. In fact, they weren't waiting. They were following me. After about, 45 minutes to an hour, I kept noticing this car behind me. And it would speed up when I would, and it would slow down when I would. So when I got into the desert past Little Rock, I decided to test it, and I saw a paved road off to the side. So I quickly took the paved road, and sure enough, they're right behind me. So I knew this road was probably just going further and further into the desert. So what I did was I just slammed on the brakes and drove the car into a sandbank and threw it in park. Got out, started to get out as their car had to swerve around me and stopped about, 10, 15 yards ahead of me.
To keep from hitting your car that just
exactly
dove into the bank.
Well, I drove into the bank, and they stopped on the pavement about 10, 15 yards ahead of me.
Now, I'm looking at official Los Angeles County Sheriff's pictures right now. I have in my hand, and your car is full of bullet holes. Yeah, I count 20 more or so.
Well, they said there was about 26 hits in the car. They said they were probably using shotguns with double-aught buck and 44 mag because of the slugs.
I was going to say, those holes up there by that door looked like they'd be 44.
Yeah.
They're not shotgun.
Yeah.
So there must have been a heck of a firefight.
Well, what happened was when they stopped in front of me, I started to get out of the car, and when I saw the doors open and about 4 or 5 guys in the car with guns, I stood up behind my door, which was now open, and started firing shots at them. I fired off a couple of shots into the chest of one of the men in the rear seat, and then I fired a headshot at one in the passenger side as he was getting out.
I'm looking at all these shooting awards that you've gotten and all the trophies. You must be a pretty good shot.
Michael had me join a shooting club in order to hone my skills.
Okay, back to the shootout now. What happened?
Well, as I said, I fired off those shots, and then I started to head back to the rear of the car to get better cover, and then that's when they started firing. I fired a couple of more shots in their direction and then took off into the desert, where they kept firing at me.
So you just ran off into the desert. I know the area well, and there's nothing but desert there.
Yeah, especially at that time. Little Rock only had about 4 buildings. Of course, now I think after all these years it has maybe 6. But
that's true.
Well, I took off in the desert, and I'm wearing dress shoes, a dress shirt, and dress pants. So it was pretty cold out, but I just kept moving back towards what I thought was Little Rock.
any idea who these guys were?
No idea.
Now, did you report that? Well, you must have reported to the sheriff's office. I'm looking at official sheriff's pictures here.
Well, I finally made it back to Little Rock, called the sheriff's department, and they told me they were just about ready to send out a search party because they found my car still running the next day with the lights still on. And we never found out who it was. But it was shortly after I started working with the King of Morocco.
Let's change the subject a little bit. What type of equipment did you use on these assignments? I mean, we've seen in the movies James Bond with laser guns, laser watches. He had everything you could think of. Did you all have equipment like that?
We wish we would have had equipment like that. Sometimes we would get maybe a little help with a vehicle or something, but it was mainly what we could muster up ourselves. We had to be very creative. What I did, because I was utilized also for my expertise in behavior, being able to spot people, judge their behavior.
Were you surprised at what people would believe?
Oh,
I mean, you tell them something and they just believe it.
I'm never surprised. If you approach somebody with the right suggestion, it will work if you understand their behavior. For example, you could say to two women, "You look beautiful today." One takes it literally and says, "Thank you very much." The other one picks up an inference and says, "Well, what was wrong with me yesterday?" So by understanding, some people take things literally, some people work more on what they think you're saying, that gives you information that allows you now to approach that individual in a way that they're going to be much more susceptible.
Thank you very much for taking the time to speak out and tell us this amazing story. I'm Judd McIlvain, the troubleshooter. Thank you again for listening.